All right.
I was just in the bathroom. Oh, hey. Hi. Hi.
Hello there, traders.
Hey.
We are back with Everything's Late and Nobody Dies.
Oh, that was good. We said it together.
Everybody's Late, Nobody Dies. It's our talk show right from Black Cat Comics right here in Salt Lake City, Utah,
I'm waving for the store.
with owner Greg Gage.
Hiya.
So this week we're going to talk about indies. What is an indie comic book? We got a couple great comments from the community, and we'll go over those. Going to show off some really cool indie books that Greg has here in the shops. So what is an indie? What's an indie?
I feel like the indie definition keeps changing, and it always has. Like, initially, I feel like an indie comic was, one of the San Francisco comics or Kitchen Sinks or something like that
Absolutely.
from the 70s.
Absolutely.
And then that became more underground. And then you had Caliber and, all those other, like, Tiny Arrow and all those tiny companies that were in the 80s. And then those went away. So, and it kind of used to be, in my mind, it used to be creator owned. So if a creator owned that comic, those characters and things like that, I would consider that indie.
Okay, so we are collectors of a certain age, like both of us.
That was a very kind way to say that. We're old bastards.
We're the broken down old guys that hang around comic shops. That's what we do. Some of us do it for a living. Lucky us. So I think when we were coming up in the 80s, I really do see that the definition of indie has changed, and I think it changed a lot primarily with the introduction of what Image did.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, in the early in 1990, I think, wasn't it 90, 89 or 90?
No, it was. Oh no, it was. I think it was 92, wasn't it? Yeah, it
Was
was
it that
92
way?
because they're doing their anniversary thing now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that really moved the goalpost for what an indie comic is and how people look at that. Because prior to that, Ninja Turtles, like, to me, that was an indie.
Right, yeah.
It was done on a mimeograph machine in some dude's garage.
Yeah, the Tick, things like that.
Ralph Snart,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah. I would go even before Image and say that I think maybe Now Comics changed a lot. Because they were, they did Ralph Snart and they did, all those weird indie comics. And then they started kind of like Image and everybody else has done. They started getting the licenses. They did Married with Children, they did Terminator, they did Fright Night, and they were still considered an indie publisher. But it's an indie publisher that started publishing bigger stuff, which I think kind of almost led to Image and saying, yeah, we can do this. So it's weird to say Image is an indie publisher when Spawn was selling, $2 million a month, and which those numbers now people they're what? That's inconceivable.
Right.
But an indie publisher being the number one selling comic with millions going out is weird. And another thing that I feel changed the landscape of indie stuff is Kickstarter, Patreon, all that kind of stuff.
It definitely has changed the way that indies are brought into the market, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've noticed in the conversations over the last week about what is an indie comic, I think my perception of what an indie comic is has changed in the last week quite a bit.
Possibly.
Looking into this, because to me, like I said, it was Ninja Turtles was definitely an indie. Ralph Snart was an underground indie type stuff, and a lot of those were.
Reed Fleming, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Great stuff, but back in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, you had Marvel and DC, and everything else was indie. The definition at that point is if you're not Marvel or DC, you're indie.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can think in those terms anymore.
It's hard to think like that because, it's, again, like you said, Image changed a lot, but then even Image started doing big licensing.
Right.
They were doing G.I. Joe and, all kinds of stuff that they, Turtles and Gru and all this other stuff. which were indie books that Image picked up, but they had to license it from the creators.
Right.
So they're still sort of indie, maybe. It's tough to say.
At what point do those books become mainstream?
Yeah.
You know,
I would say only when there's several seasons of a cartoon, a couple of movies, bad remake, lots of toys, T-shirts, trading cards with stale gum.
Top's number one gum manufacturer in the world.
Topps is?
Topps is.
Still?
Probably not anymore, but at one point I was just watching a Modern Marvels History Channel thing about it. Number one producer of bubblegum in the world in the 80s and 90s.
God, I believe that. Yeah. Those things, oh man, I
probably
still got some of that in my stomach from a Kiss card.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, well, still got a lot of that.
Every pack of baseball cards, football cards, Kiss cards, Marvel cards, every card you can possibly match. Star Wars cards had that little pink stick bubblegum.
God, remember how the cards smelled though, like forever?
Yeah. Oh yeah, my card collection still smells like that.
Hi, welcome to Old Talk. We're your hosts, a couple of old people. Nice to see ya.
Yeah.
No, I think, it's almost hard to say what's an indie and what's not. I mean, like this, Little Monsters, is that an indie?
Well, and
sort of, because it's creator owned. It's not like it's not one of the big two, but is it the big three? Is it the big five? Like, what is... I think it's individualized anymore.
See, I was going under the impression that the big three, based on sales, and after you hit a certain threshold, that's when you're no longer an indie book. You're a mainstream comic book. But then, by that logic, is Boom no longer an indie publisher because Berserk sold? Is the number one selling book last year.
I don't think Boom is an indie publisher anymore.
I don't think they are. And I think for me, where I'm sitting on the whole indie thing is more to do with licensing, honestly.
Yeah.
Because Boom's putting out some huge licenses. They got movie deals. They've got, you've got Buffy. You've got everything else that they're picking
taking
up
a lot of licenses from other companies right now. And they don't, they don't act like an indie company anymore.
Right.
They used to talk to people there all the time. They'd email me, they'd call me, and say, hey, what's up? I haven't heard from anyone from Boom probably a year and a half.
Wow.
All they do is just send out the flat mass emails and say, hey, everything's great. We got 17 variants on Berserker this month. That's about all we get anymore.
Well, and when the boom happened over the course of this past year, a lot of those companies have taken to that kind of attitude. I know Scout has done the same. IDW has been that way for a while. And then you have what I consider nowadays to be underground, which that's changed a lot. Back in the day, underground was, Red Room and books like that would be considered underground, mostly because of content.
Right. And also the art style on them a lot, like Ed Piskor stuff.
It was a lot of very similar.
Ed Piskor stuff is very 70s kitchen sink sort of underground stuff.
Like I mentioned Turtles earlier, that was very much the original Turtles. Yeah. Very much in that style.
Yeah.
And they had that, it was two dudes living in a rundown house in Detroit, and I mean, you could very much see that in the art style.
I'm not sure who it was that did those, but I sure hope they're doing okay now.
I think they'll get by.
Good. Okay. Yeah. I always worry about
Bob
comic creators.
But now, to me, the underground scene is more like, you've got Bleak Haven, which is some dude come up with this idea, found himself an artist, and is self-publishing, found his own printer, published them himself, came to the comic shop, said, I have this book, will you carry my book? Didn't even know that there was such a thing as Diamond Distributing.
Right.
Knows nothing about that. And I have found in the last couple of years a lot of books like that that are fantastic content.
And when you are a publisher, you should buy my nude photo coffee table book that I've got. I've already got the photos. I keep texting him to Eric.
Yeah.
He doesn't text back, but I think it's because he's so impressed with the artistic quality.
Like it is.
Don't you dare cut that out.
It is spectacular.
No, I think one big thing about indie that that you touched on there, true indie stuff, I guess, if you want to say that. I mean, again, I think everybody's definition of that is different, and that's okay. It's like, what's the definition of mainstream? You get people, people arguing, what's a punk band? People arguing, no, Green Day's a punk band. No, Green Day's a mainstream pop band. No, there's so many labels for so many things now. Everybody's got their own idea of what they all are. But I think a key thing that maybe you said is without saying it, is it's regional. So Bleak Haven, Salt City Strangers, Chris Hoffman does, like those guys, like Adrian Rupp doing Chim Chum, his book, his All Ages book, which is really, really funny and really cute and really cool. Those are self-published. They're here. Even, you look at Robert Crumb's stuff, which is definitely underground and indie.
Right.
That was regional. That was like San Francisco stuff. Last Gasp, San Francisco Comics, things like that. So I think I feel like the regional aspect of it definitely. I feel like if not defines it, has a lot to do with it, because I've been, when I was in England. I went to some comic shops in England, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I don't know what that is, but I'm grabbing it now." And they were like, "Yeah, it's a local person. Not sure. I should create." And that's how they talk. That's English.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. I bought a bargain of that, right? And I just bought it, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool, man." And that's so indie. Like, you don't get more regional and location based than that stuff. When you're in a different country, you walk in, and they're like, "Oh, check this out."
Well, and it really shows when you go to the conventions. I went to Rose City, and they had regional creators from Seattle, from up in Canada, come down for that show, and it's very different than the stuff we're seeing here locally in Salt Lake. And the Salt Lake local stuff is a lot of superheroes, a little more polished. Salt City Strangers, a little more polished than a lot of those indies. You start getting up into Seattle, and there's a lot more like street level grit to the books. Up in Canada, a lot more horror type stuff for some reason. A lot of vampires and zombies and stuff come out of the regional Canada stuff. So
that's Canadian. There's forests.
There's a lot of area for something to jump out at you.
Plus Canada. Yeah. They can afford to have monsters. They got healthcare. They're going to be fine.
Well, it's a big country. Very few superheroes. Alpha Flight. That's about it.
Yeah. And Puck. Little
he doesn't take up much room.
He does not. Pocket Puck is what I like to call him.
Right on.
So I think it's. Oh, actually, here. There's a really cool, you would say, underground indie book. Let me grab this.
All right.
This is a person that is going to be at the store. They will be here. This girl sick, Madison Del Porto.
Okay.
She's customer here, and they will be among the people signing at the store. June 11th, big anniversary signing with like 10 people here, 9 or 10 people. But I really wanted Madison to be here because this is like such cool stuff. It's like body horror, kind of LGBTQ body horror stuff.
Okay.
Really, really cool stuff. Now this, I feel like this is a perfect example of that. Because did the mic pick up that soothing sound? Good. So like this right here, this is just done at their house.
Wow.
This is self-published. It is.
Is it self-printed? Wow.
Yeah. Yep. There's like sketches in the back and stuff, character sketches.
Very cool.
All kinds of stuff like this. And it's, and this right here, this is underground indie.
Yeah, that's definitely what I would consider underground for sure.
Yeah.
Like another one of our local comic shops has. They're really into the rock and roll comics, and they publish like the Tool and that type of stuff. They do exclusive covers on them and whatnot. I don't think I don't think I would consider those even as an underground. Like people that buy them because they're like, oh, check out this cool underground Tool comic.
Right. Yeah.
If you're printing on an exclusive, 5,000 of a cover, how underground is it?
Yeah, it can be underground. They did the rock and roll comics in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
Those I would say are definitely underground comics. Those are definitely indie
Right.
comics because they were all unauthorized.
Yeah.
Not all of these are unauthorized. There's a lot of them that have to be authorized by the
Right.
bands, by the artists, things like that because people are sue crazy now.
Right.
And the unauthorized stuff, like about the only unauthorized stuff you see anymore, really, is maybe a musician here or there that have died, and maybe like you can almost track it. They've re-released their catalog, their family, or their whatever, and then they put this out and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you can do that to bring some attention to these albums that we just re-released, but like the only thing that really is unauthorized anymore, and this sounds weird, but serial killer stuff.
Right.
I mean, like
Yeah,
that
there
Ed
is a
Gein
lot.
book that
Right.
Eric Powell did.
The John Wayne Gacy book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's all that stuff because what are they going to sue you from prison? Yeah, and they can't get. You can't get it authorized anyway because they can't make money from behind bars.
Right. I mean, there to be a true underground book. I think there's a feel about it. There's a real grit there. Like if you look at the underground stuff from the 70s, like it was dirty. It was.
Oh God, yeah.
It was not just in content, but it felt gritty.
Yeah, it was ew.
Yeah.
And there were spelling errors on every second or third page. Well, that still happens, but reading a DC book not too long ago, and I was like, did they not spell it DC? You've got like 5 editors on here. Come on. But yeah, there are like misspellings and bad grammar and nudity and just weird general overall weirdness. Just odd stuff, and that's why I think you're right. It's probably like something like Red Room is the closest to an indie underground book we have right now, I think.
Right. I would agree with that for sure. Okay, so bring this up real quick. So on last week's video, we got a comment from John Stout. We all know John.
Hi, John. It's my role.
He's going to be the official greeter
Yes.
of the unnamed comic book show that we have a cool name for.
That's not the name, by the way.
So John says, the indie comic that is currently my favorite is Little Monsters by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. It's published by Image, and that's, of course, this book here. I don't know what cover this is. This is the only one we had left. Published by Image. I honestly think that Image blurs the line of what was traditionally the description of an independent publisher when I first started reading indies in the early 1980s. Image put out so many books that they aren't a small press company, which is what indies were back then. And besides Image and maybe Boom, pretty much still are. I read more indies than anything else. I read pretty much all the Batman titles and a few other stray DC books, but the rest are all independents. So he's saying that basically what we were talking about.
What we're saying, yeah, when you start having this enormous print run, can you be indie anymore, really?
Right.
And also, if you've got, and everything that, like, every 4th or 5th book that Image puts out is a TV show or a movie.
An interesting thought that popped in my head. So we're talking about indies. Ninja Turtles certainly are not indies.
Yeah, not
Like
anymore.
Ninja Turtles, they've got 2 titles. They put out a one-shot every other week. So right there, that makes IDW not an indie
Yeah.
publisher.
Every 3 years, they complete one 5-issue series.
That was so good, though.
Anyway, tangent.
So that and to me means that Ninja Turtles are not indie,
Right.
but they certainly were indie when they first started. Like the guys were producing these in their basement. So are those original books indies, and now the new ones are not? I mean, where do we draw the line there?
Yeah, I think you can grow beyond indie. Like,
For sure.
you know, I mean, I think, you know, well, The Crow was indie. Definitely
Right.
is not now.
No.
I mean, if you want to really get down to brass tacks on it, Marvel and DC were indie when they started out.
Right.
You know, they did small print run. They're like, what the hell are we going to do here with this? We don't know what's happening. You know, and then just grew, and they're huge, of course. Is that Cat's phone, or is your heart monitor, or is that?
It's Cass.
Okay, good. I was getting where I thought I upset you with something.
Which is tied into my heart monitor.
Oh, okay. Can she stop it?
She has.
Oh God.
We got our own
Let's
red
get
room.
that. We have security. Oh, we're gonna get a lot of views on this one.
All right. Our next comment comes from Damien, Sleepy Reader 666.
Hello, Damien.
Yeah, he's gonna dig that. How's it going, Damien? He says, I think indie is kind of a slippery concept. I guess I think of indies in 3 different ways. Creator-owned comics, with Image Comics seeming to be the biggest proponent of this. Smaller, scrappy companies taking risks around the edges of the bigger superhero market. And real alternative presses doing unique, uncommercial work and self-publishing and self-publishers a step above zines. It's hard for me to think of licensed character comics as indie, no matter how small the publisher. And this is one I think is interesting. Or companies like AWA, which are slick, well-financed businesses that aren't based on creator ownership and are possibly set up to be feeders into Hollywood.
I would refer. That's a really good point.
I think that's an excellent point.
It is.
And it's
Damien.
something. And I know that you're not familiar with Damien, but Damien is like, he's our comic guru. I mean, he's brilliant at this stuff.
He's got the birthmark.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He does.
Now, AWA, that's an interesting point with them. It's weird because, again, you know, you start splitting hairs with this stuff, but they're all good points.
Right.
You know, AWA is definitely set up for Hollywood. You know, they're making deals left and right.
Right.
Almost everything they put out, you're gonna see that as,
Yeah.
you know.
So, yeah.
Oh
the
yeah, and that's
Joneses.
from our good store friend Michael Marisi.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike's a great guy. He's been here signing, and a really, really nice guy.
I don't know if you've read this book, but the Joneses is a brilliant concept. It's very timely. It speaks to issues that, you know, that we face as a society today. It speaks to, you know, the race issue, economic issues, politics, and all that, and done in a very entertaining way. And as soon as I read it, I was like, yeah, that's getting optioned. That's
Yeah.
and you see that a lot with AWA, very polished work that's very optionable. You see it a lot with the creators from Bad Idea Comics. But a lot of what they did is easily optionable.
Yeah.
You know, ENIAC would be just an amazing Netflix series. Like, it just would. You know, Tankers is brilliant and would be a great movie. So they had some good stuff.
And they got great talent there too.
They do.
But the way, you know, the way they did it, it's almost like they wanted to be a big company and an indie company at the same time. You know, they wanted to say like, oh, we're this little company that could, and we're just doing this thing. but there's so much money behind that.
Right.
You know, it was super, super, super financed, and there was this, you know, level of, oh well, these are the special people that can sell them. These are the special people that can read them. You can only get one. We control the fate of your store, and that's the thing I didn't love.
Right.
That's why I didn't even try to distribute their stuff. I don't.
It's unfortunate that we're in a place right now where the only way a book gets recognized is with that auction, and I think that's the bro collectors. They're out there trying to drive value of these books.
Yeah, it's the spec market, the crazy spec market.
Right.
The spec market's not bad. The crazy spec market's a bit much.
Right. It gets really insane, and I think we're at a point where it's causing, like it's giving us just the opposite effect.
Yeah.
And
well, and I consider AWA like going back to the AWA thing, you know, I mean, I consider them to be a larger, well-financed, bigger company that's putting out indie books.
right.
So, you know, almost the opposite of what Image was, which was a small indie company with a handful of people that were putting out huge books. So it's almost the opposite of that.
But if they're putting out indie books with the intent of having that option, or trying to get that option,
Yeah.
get it made into a film, an indie publisher at that point. I mean, and even to some extent, you can say the same thing about Nice House on the Lake.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's an indie book.
That's very much an indie book. A lot of the Hill House stuff, refrigerator full of heads, and
Yeah.
you know, basket full of heads, that kind of stuff.
Sorry, I love that title so much.
But that's,
No, that stuff would have been, you know, would have been Caliber Press or, you know, something like that way back when.
right, and it's not tied into the greater Marvel, greater DC universe.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess Next Wave was tied into that with characters, but they were all 4th, 5th, 6th tier characters at that time.
Right.
You know, that were like, oh yeah, whatever, who cares? You know, put him out there, let Warren Ellis do whatever he wants to do, which in hindsight was a bad idea, but not for comics, but personally. Anyway, I feel like there is that indie publisher versus indie book, because big publishers can make indie books,
Right.
and indie publishers can all of a sudden have their hands on a huge book, like Boom has several times. But
Right.
yeah, Boom. I mean, you know, Boom they definitely started as a very small indie publisher, but they didn't know what to do with it when they got a little bit bigger, so they had to just take a rest. You know, had to.
So, and I went out and I grabbed some books off the shelf, and we're going to try to highlight some of the books that relate to the conversations that we have. So back in the 90s when I was collecting, your indie publishers were Dark Horse, was really big. Topps was big. Valiant was pretty big. Most of which, I don't think Topps is even still around doing books. Valiant and Dark Horse, of
they have
course.
a hell of a gum production.
And they're still doing cards. But like going back to some of the previous conversations, so Betty Page, Dynamite across the board, which a lot of people think of as an indie publisher. I mean, but look at their licensing. They've got Vampirilla, they've got Red Sonja, Betty Page, Elvira, Kiss. I mean, these are not small licenses.
Yeah, they're huge. Army of Darkness.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got to deal with Universal Pictures. I wouldn't exactly say that that's an indie publisher. You know, that's pretty big stuff.
And they're publishing at the levels, like they're printing at the levels that you would think would be considered no longer in the realm of indies anymore, because like they're publishing thousands and thousands of these titles.
Well, and when they have one title and they publish, you know, say 20,000 copies or 30,000 copies, it's not hard to do when you have 6,000 or 7,000 covers.
Right.
You know, but I mean that definitely helps them with that. So I think that, you know, those numbers are high. The licenses are big. I I don't know that Dynamite's an independent company. I think they were when they picked up The Boys. That's out of context, very wrong. When they picked up the publishing rights to the comic book called The Boys,
Right.
From DC, when somebody at DC finally read it and went, God, no, and then they picked that up. Yeah, they were a smaller company. They're a pretty small company at that point.
Right.
But the thing that you need to think about with that is Dynamic Forces is Dynamite.
Right.
And they've always been a big company that's done a lot of big stuff.
Right.
Not publishing, but with the signed stuff and some of the variants and things like that. But that's always been a very well-financed operation with Nick Burchi.
Right. And another example that I have is the Assassin's Creed stuff from Dark Horse. So,
it's Assassin. I've been mispronouncing that. I'll tell you later.
okay.
I'll tell you when we're not so close to each other. It's nice to see you, by the way.
Dark Horse back in the day, had some huge licenses. And I think Assassin's Creed is probably as big as they have right now.
Probably pretty close. Because, and they lost all the Joss Whedon stuff, all the Buffy stuff. They lost Aliens and Predator and Star Wars to Marvel.
Right.
I mean, they've just lost stuff left and right.
So, and then, so kind of on the flip side of that, we've got this one. I don't know if you had a chance to read it yet.
Yes.
8 Billion Genies from Image.
So a week.
Image, a huge book, or a huge company. I would say Image, definitely not independent as a company, but still putting out indie books. This one feels like an indie.
It really does. It's crazy and fun and weird, and they let Charles and Ryan do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They could come in. I was gonna say they could come in with the most ridiculous idea ever. But have you read God Hates Astronauts? You don't do drugs. Read that, and you think you will. You think you're on drugs because it is insane. It is crazy, and it is so funny and just nuts. It's just nuts. And then they did Curse Words together, and then this.
Curse Words was awesome.
Yeah, and God Hates Astronauts was just Ryan. But then he teamed up with Charles, and God, if you've ever been around those two, Charles is the straight man, Ryan is the comedian. He just goes, it's hilarious. It's so funny. Yeah, but Charles is a lawyer, Ryan is a crazy artist. So, and somehow they get along, and they're like great friends. So, yeah.
Opposites attract.
Yeah. Personally, I don't like anybody that's not exactly the same as me.
Yeah, I've noticed. We are so similar.
Very, very. Yeah, I have a very low tolerance for difference of opinions and things.
So it's interesting
such a
to
great
me.
Book. God, it's awesome.
It is a fantastic book. I can't wait for number 2. But I mean, is that the sign of your indie publisher? The publishers that give their creators free reign, give a Kirkman his own sandbox to play in, and create all these characters in something that'll blow up.
I think it's that indie way of doing business and an indie business, and I think they're just far too different these days. Those are very different things now.
Right.
It used to be one and the same. If you were a big company, you did big stuff. If you were a small company, you did small indie under the radar stuff, but that's not how it is anymore. And I think a lot of that is because of the movies, the TV shows, cartoons, animated series, animated features, things like that. But I think a lot of that has changed with that, because you can't. It's almost like you can't be a tiny indie publisher and survive anymore. You've got to have a huge hit. You've got to have a movie. You've got to have something, or else you just can't survive in this landscape.
Well, and we get, and not bashing on anybody, but you get publishers.
You know who you are.
Everybody knows who you are. But you get publishers that option every single book that comes out. Like, I will sell you this option for $1.
Yeah. Because if it's optioned, it's a hot spec book.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a couple companies out there that are doing that. And as soon as they announced this property's optioned, you see that, oh, there's a hot indie title and it's optioned, and all of a sudden that issue 1 was selling for $20 on eBay day of release.
Yeah.
But you're never going to make that
I mean,
option
yeah.
fly.
Yeah, I mean, they don't say it's optioned for, $5,000, and it's never going to, come to fruition. You're never
Right.
going to see it. I mean, Hack Slash has been optioned, I think, 4 times. Transmetropolitan has been, I think Transmet has been optioned at least once. Invincible was optioned a couple times before they finally went through with it.
Right.
That's an important thing to remember. For anybody that's out there speccing or doing anything like that, or is really interested in doing that stuff, be careful, because almost everything has been optioned. And just because it's optioned doesn't mean it's actually going anywhere. And don't get burned. Don't pay too much unless you're getting it from Black Cat SLC on eBay. Then you bid that up. Just bid it up and just, there you go. But otherwise, don't pay too much for that stuff.
Right.
So what we're saying is, everybody, thank you for your comments. We have no conclusions at all beyond what we had when we asked this question in the first place.
I was about to say, we started out with trying to go down the path and kind of determining what an indie book is, what an indie publisher is, and we are no closer
We've screwed
to
ourselves
figuring
up.
that out. I don't have a clue.
We've screwed ourselves up
I don't have a
completely
clue.
on that.
I mean, I have found that since I've gotten back into comics in the last 5 years, that before, back in the 90s, I read Spider-Man and Avengers, Defenders, Doctor Strange. I was a big Marvel guy. I read all the Trinity stuff from DC. It was Marvel and DC 100%. And since I've gotten back into it in the last 5 years, I read, what I'm personally reading is pretty much exclusively indie.
Yeah.
I mean, the last mainstream Big 2 book that I read was Daredevil, this latest Daredevil run. I think they did a great job on it. I really enjoyed that.
It felt very indie.
It did. And the detective comic stuff. Batman was okay, and I kind of fell off of that quick, but the detective stuff I thought was really good.
I got to catch up on that stuff.
So, but I ended up just pulling all that stuff from my pull list, because my backlog on it is so huge. I don't have time to. I'll never get caught up on it.
Yeah.
Because I'm reading indies. I'm reading all the indie stuff.
I'm with you there, though. That's also a problem. There's so much stuff. If when the day comes that I retire, I really hope that I got another 30 years or so left, so I can get through all those stacks of things and mainly put them away, so my wife's not pissed at me anymore.
Right. So
Our producer Kat gave that a definite yes.
I was smart. I took the stack of comic books from the dining room table down into my office this morning before she got up. So
There you go. That's a good idea.
that doesn't happen often.
I left all mine on the kitchen table. I may be in trouble when I get home tonight.
You still have some.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know.
But yeah, my personal tastes have
Indie or not?
gone to the indies.
Yeah.
I mean, I buy Spawn. I don't read it.
You support Spawn.
I support Spawn.
Yeah.
I got a lot of cool covers, Spawn covers. And part of that is you buy a Spawn for $2.99 today, you can sell it for $5 next year.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're never losing money on Spawn.
And any parents out there know all about supporting your Spawn. It never stops.
Ever.
Yeah.
But the stuff I'm reading is, it's all indie, all of it.
Yeah.
But for the most part,
Oh.
it's Department of Truth,
Yeah.
Ice Cream Man, Ha Ha in the past year, Willy's Wonderland.
It's so funny. It's really good. It's really fun.
An indie that I'm not going to read is John Carter from Mars. Sorry. And I buy a lot of Xenoscope.
So you've been on that for weeks. It's just great. I love it.
I cannot express how horrible that book is. Like, it's really that bad. It's unreadable.
All you got to say, I said earlier, your John Carter of Mars is my all-star Batman. Or my Moon Knight TV series. Sorry, I finished that.
I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
Okay, now this is back where we should be.
Yeah, this feels
There
like
we go.
comfortable territory.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, I thought they did a great job with Moon Knight.
I loved about an hour and a half of it. And I was bored by about 3 hours of it, and I thought another hour and a half was okay.
Yeah, we got nowhere on indies.
We didn't, but I think we made a lot of points, and I think none of them really came to any conclusion. But
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation.
yeah.
Kind of see
I don't
where
know
we're
if there
going
is
with
any
this.
way to finish up that conversation.
There really isn't, because it's going to mean something different to everybody,
Yeah.
and it's
Again,
going to mean
it's-
something different to me next week.
Right. Yeah. It is like having that it's like having the pop punk conversation.
Right.
I hate to keep coming back to that, but it is just like that. When people are like, no, that's not pop punk, or no, that's not punk, or that's not pop music, or that's not rock, or that's not this. And they are all talking about the same band.
Right.
It's like, yeah, okay, is Kiss metal? Is Kiss rock and roll? Is Kiss rock? Is Kiss hard rock? Is Kiss, disco for that one album? It's
They were
like,
definitely disco for
They
that one
were.
album.
Yeah. Wasp. They were a metal band. They were a glam band. They were a horror band. They were an industrial band. They were like a Christian band after he converted to being born again. What are they? What are these bands? What are these comics? It's all going to be individualized, and that's it. And that's my final word. And I'm correct.
All right, and
said so.
and the official stand of this podcast, Green Day is not a punk band.
I'm going to go with that. Yeah.
It's grunge.
Grunge.
Wow.
Okay, and if
So,
any of
we're
any
looking
of you
for a
out
new
there
producer.
have any producing experience, please leave your contact information underneath. Is it not grunge? It's not grunge. No. You can't be a punk band and go nya, 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 nya. You can't do it. No. Anyway, okay.
All right. So
Comics. That's right. Yes, comic books.
and I'm going to throw this one up there just because I love the cover. All right.
That's okay.
Sham Comics. That I have not read this yet.
They're so fun.
I think I grabbed it. I think I grabbed it on your recommendation.
Yeah, they're really fun.
I'll buy an extra copy just to make sure. But it sounds very interesting. They're taking Golden Age, pre-code horror, and putting in their own word bubbles.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. They're rewriting.
All right.
Rewriting stuff that's out of copyright, and actually Chris Hoffman did that too. Speaking of him earlier, he did that with a bunch of stuff, and I actually wrote a story for it that is yet to be published. Chris, if you're paying attention, when is it? But yeah, so what? Boy, let's see. Maybe. Oh, how about distribution?
All right.
We can talk about distribution.
So next week we're going to discuss distribution and how distribution has affected the comic book industry. It's changed a lot over the years. It's changed a lot in the last 2 years, specifically. So I know we've got some comic shop owners out there. If you'd like to weigh in, you can leave a message down below. Write me on Instagram or Facebook. Drop me a line, theroguetraderutah@gmail.com. If you would like to film like a short minute or so about your opinions, we can splice that in as well. I know that a lot of you like to throw yourself on camera, so we can do that.
I can even say hi to you with your name following immediately.
And
That's
that
what I
won't
do.
cost you near as much as you think it would.
No, it's surprisingly low.
All right. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.
And smash that.
Smash it.
I meant to do that, don't I? I'm glad I
All right. Smash the like button, and we'll see you next time, traders. Bye.